Hello everyone and welcome to the Rosen Chronicles, specifically the episode in which we will be talking about the New Deal, relief, recovery, and reform. That was also a Star Wars reference for those of you who caught it. If you didn't, don't worry about it, let's just move on. So, in terms of relief, the New Deal focused on relief for the unemployed and poor, recovery of the economy to normal levels, and finally reform of the financial system to prevent a repeated depression. Of course, as most would, they did not want it to happen again because that would have been absolutely terrible. Now, the big question that we're going to focus on today is, what is the right role for the government? Now, after the Great Depression, the government started to get involved in the American economy like it had never been involved before. Many people criticized both the government as a whole and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president at the time, for getting so involved as they did. So we're going to talk about today what you guys think about the right role for the government so that you can actually have a better sense of what role you want the government to have today so that you can go into the future being the activists that I know you can be. So the first question we're going to focus on today, ladies and gentlemen, is why was the Great Depression so bad? At this point, I'd like you to turn to the notes section in your handout where you should see this question at the very, very top of the page. Why was the Great Depression so bad? Now, there were several reasons why the Great Depression was so bad, and I'd like you to take notes on every single one of these reasons in your handout, as you always do. Just think of this just like a normal everyday lesson. I recognize that this format is a little bit odd, but we're going to do our best with it today. So, why was the Great Depression so bad? The first reason, ladies and gentlemen, had to do with the stock market crash. This crash created serious fear in the hearts of the American people. They originally thought that they were invincible. They were basically gambling on the stock market, buying on margin, speculating with different stocks they really did not know would do well or do poorly. So it created fear in their hearts because they soon realized that they could not control the American economy as they once thought that they could. In addition to this, the Great Depression was so bad because of the bank failures. 9,000 banks went out of business, taking people's money too. As we all know, these banks were responsible for actually giving the loans to the citizens who were then using those loans to invest in the stock market. And 9,000 banks went out of business because of this practice, and the people's money went with them. In addition to that, there was a decrease in consumption in pretty much every single good in the United States, simply because people did not have money to purchase the goods and services that they once did. Therefore, the businesses were not getting the amount of money that they were originally used to getting. In addition to that, there were higher tariffs, specifically with regard to the Hawley-Smoot tariff, thanks to our President Herbert Hoover, who created that tariff, which resulted in a trade war between the United States and European countries who would basically go back and forth raising the tariffs on each other in order to match each other's tariffs, so that they could eventually hope to trade with one another again. We stopped trading, basically causing the Great Depression to get even worse as a result of the tariffs and the trade war. In addition to this, the Dust Bowl, as we learned about yesterday, seriously forced the farmers to struggle. The Dust Bowl and the drought caused dust storms that made it incredibly difficult to grow crops. And while there were several solutions already being put into place, as we learned about them yesterday, the farmers still struggled and pretty much did not get their crops back to the point where they once were. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like you to do is go to the bottom of the page and answer that check for understanding question. Which of the causes of the Great Depression strikes you as the most important, and why? Go ahead and pause the video, ladies and gentlemen, and answer this question now. Now, after President Hoover, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president in 1932. Upon becoming president, President Roosevelt pledged a new deal between the government and the people to try to get us back on our feet after the Great Depression. Something that's really interesting about Roosevelt is that he was the only president to ever be in a wheelchair as a result of the disease polio. Nevertheless, he brought supreme confidence to the White House, as he is famous for saying, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Now, I'd like you to take a look at the map to the right. Notice the landslide victory that Roosevelt had over Hoover. That is how dissatisfied the American people were with Hoover's leadership, and they were truly ready for someone new, someone passionate, someone hopeful, someone who would bring supreme leadership and hope to our country. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, there's actually a video that I'd like you to watch about Roosevelt, talking about how he was such a beacon of hope for our country after what had become the Great Depression.
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Here was this aristocrat from Dutchess County, confined to a wheelchair, Harvard educated, but because of his almost innate sense of communication skills and the medium of radio, he was transported into the living rooms of almost every home in America. And in our household, FDR was a demigod. He was the voice that always gave them hope. My parents really worshipped FDR. And it was not just because of policies. They felt connected to him because of that great warm radio voice and that amazing ability that he had to speak directly to the fears and the hopes of the American people.
I can assure you that it is safer for you to keep your money in a reopened bank than to keep it under the mattress.
FDR and the Great Depression and the New Deal was an amazing time because FDR was about establishing hope, trying to bring hope back to life for people that were caught in this unbelievably chaotic period of economic chaos and stress.
In a lot of ways, FDR was actually an extremely unlikely figure to become a sort of moral and visionary leader in the ways that he did. Now, I think there's a great myth of FDR that he came into office, the country rallied around him, and the Depression was eventually solved. Now, that's not true. FDR was hated passionately by large portions of the population, and yet he did something really significant in those first months. First of all, he acted, and he acted in significant ways, and he came in saying, we can whip this thing, and whether or not he quite did it in those first months, he brought dramatic new ideas to the table and really did upend a lot of assumptions and make the idea that change really was possible a reality in many ways.
This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper.
Anytime we examine the New Deal, the legislation that FDR initiated as swiftly as he took the oath of office, you have to put it in the context of what had come before. We'd had a run of Republican pro-business presidents of the United States. Herbert Hoover was one of them. Cal Coolidge was another one, obviously. FDR came along and determined that something much bolder was needed to save the country, to provide a kind of a lifeboat, if you will, legislatively. So the New Deal was a real upheaval of everything that had gone before. And interestingly, the Republicans in Congress were willing to go along because the country was in such desperate shape. The idea of Social Security or public works programs, the WPA, the various other agricultural programs, which became critically important to the restoration of American agriculture and the modernization of it. The Republicans were willing to try anything at that point because we were on the precipice. The entire country could have gone down, and almost did, from an economic point of view.
Now, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. We're going to get into the specifics of Roosevelt's presidency now and exactly what he did with the New Deal. So, Congress, as you know, is in charge of making laws, but at this time, after the Great Depression, they deferred to President Roosevelt because they simply didn't know what else to do. The programs that Roosevelt passed as laws in his first 100 days as president were known as the first New Deal. Now, what exactly is the New Deal, you're probably asking? The New Deal was when the government increased spending on the economy and as a result had a bigger role in the economy in general. Specifically, Roosevelt created groups and organizations designed to get people back to work and to keep the economy healthy. But of course, once again, this heavily increased the government's involvement in the economy. Capitalists, remember we went over the difference between capitalism and socialism. Capitalists seriously dislike government meddling in the economy, but socialists think it can be helpful. So keep that in mind as we continue to go over exactly what the New Deal entailed. Now, some important organizations to remember for the New Deal, which are also written on your handout on the next page, are the Works Progress Administration, or the WPA, in which $11 billion were put forth to create roads, buildings, etc. The Civil Works Administration, or the CWA, actually employed people to work on construction projects to get the American people back to work. The Federal Deposit Insurance Commission, or the FDIC, insured bank deposits if a bank failed. So basically, the amount of money that you deposited in the bank would always be there, would always be returned to you, no matter what happened. Of course, up to $250,000, which still at the time was a lot of money. Securities and Exchange Commission, or the SEC, regulated the stock market to avoid unfair stock trading. So basically they made rules to make sure that nothing would happen like the stock crash of 1929 ever again. The Agricultural Adjustment Administration, or the AAA, paid farmers not to grow certain crops so that catastrophes such as the Dust Bowl would never happen again. Now, these government programs, again, were put into action in order to get the economy going. These groups and organizations were designed to get people back to work and to keep the economy healthy so that we could actually recover from this Great Depression. Now, at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to answer the Check for Understanding questions listed underneath the list of New Deal programs that are on your handout. Namely, above is a list of programs Roosevelt started as part of his New Deal. Which of these do you believe was most important and why? And the second, was the way in which Roosevelt increased the government's involvement in the economy a positive or negative development, and why? Go ahead, pause the video now, and answer these questions. Now, I'm sure you're asking yourself, Miss Rosen, this all sounds good and fine, but did it actually work? Did all of these programs actually get the American economy back on its feet? And the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is it did. It truly did. Probably not as much as Roosevelt would have liked it to, but Roosevelt, in his policies and in his programs, truly changed the economy forever. For example, Roosevelt is the one who established the Social Security Act. The Social Security Act, which is still in effect today, provided a pension or retirement pay, a pension is retirement pay, for the elderly, so that if you got really, really old, after 65 years old, we would then offer a certain amount of money to you so that you would be able to stop working, so that you would be able to retire comfortably. In addition to the Social Security Act, Roosevelt also passed the Tennessee Valley Authority. This was an actually government-run company, an electrical company to be exact. This was the first time the government ever made its own business, and some people felt that this was way over the top, that the government could basically give this company a few breaks if it wanted to help it out. And this was very unfair for the type of economy the United States was founded on, the principles of the economy that the United States was founded on. Nevertheless, as I said, the New Deal did work wonders. By 1934, the economy had shown slight improvements. And while, yes, it is just slight, the fact that it improved at all was remarkable. It was a miracle. Roosevelt truly did what he had sought out to do. By 1934, 2 million new jobs were created. 10 million remained unemployed, but still the fact that 2 million people were given jobs now was remarkable. Nevertheless, the average income did stay the same, As we remember from our lesson on Tuesday, the income had actually been slashed for the American average family in half. So that income stayed the same, which was pretty unfortunate. That being said, some argued that Roosevelt had actually gone too far as a result of the New Deal, and that the improvements that were made, however much they improved, were still not enough to actually justify Roosevelt for going too far in terms of government power. Others, however, said that he did not go far enough and that he needed to do more. So it's sort of a balance in terms of the people who criticized him and the people who supported him. Some people think that he had gone too far and expanded government power to an extent to which it shouldn't have been expanded, and others actually criticized him for borrowing money to pay for his programs. However, some people think that he didn't go far enough. The opposition to the New Deal, however, was headed by the American Liberty League. This was a very, very, very famous group at the time who was very much against President Roosevelt and his New Deal actions. Now, to summarize the New Deal and exactly what President Roosevelt did for the Great Depression and the American people, I actually have another video for you guys to watch, so enjoy.
During his first 100 days in office, FDR pushed an unprecedented slate of legislation through Congress to fight the Depression. This was the start of the New Deal.
The New Deal is a series of initiatives that imparted a much greater degree of security and safety and stability to American life in all kinds of sectors, in the banking sector, the investment sector, the home building, home owning sectors, employment, and so on.
Franklin Roosevelt had a great political partner in the New Deal, his First Lady. The crippling effects of the president's polio made Eleanor indispensable to him.
She could be his eyes and his ears and his legs, and she could tour the country, and she could reach out to people, and then she could bring the country back to him. She was always pushing the New Deal and him to do more in terms of social welfare and helping Americans. And I think that in many ways, we can really see her as the conscience of the New Deal.
The New Deal expanded beyond those first 100 days. In 1935, Congress passed the Social Security Act, creating a safety net for the elderly, disabled, and unemployed. Despite the passage of the Social Security Act, FDR's New Deal didn't put an end to the Depression. It would take the industrial mobilization of World War II to achieve that goal.
In a sense, he didn't succeed any better than Herbert Hoover did economically. Where Roosevelt succeeded was in exuding public confidence, making the Depression more palatable to people, giving people the impression that he really was doing something, that he really cared.
Now, I'm sure you guys already understand why I love that video. It leaves us with a sense of hope, a sense of optimism, even though President Roosevelt didn't necessarily do as much as he had hoped. And it sort of gets us excited for World War II, which, as you guys know, is one of my very, very favorite events in American history. Both of the world wars are just so unbelievably interesting, and I hope that you guys are excited for that as well. All right, so as your last check for understanding question, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to answer the following. Do you believe the New Deal made major changes following the Great Depression? Do you think Roosevelt could have done more? Answer these questions at the bottom of your notes pages now, pause the video, and go for it. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, you are finished with your video lesson for the day. Your task now is to go through the documents in the handout packet that you picked up on your way in and answer the following question at the very, very back of the packet. Should FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, be celebrated for his leadership during the Great Depression, or not? Think about this question, answer it based on your own opinion and evidence from the documents. Take the rest of the period. Thanks for listening.